This session is focusing on emerging technologies, not only in emergency management, but in the public-private intersection, which we've been talking about now for a long time. So we've kind of got a couple of bullet point items that we're going to start with, but I expect that this conversation will deviate slightly from that at some point. I'll be surprised if it doesn't. And like all of the panels, please, the audience, if you have questions or comments, let us know. And there are mics in the room so we can hear you. And so with that, Brian, do you have anything you want to say to get us started here, or?
Good morning. Take it away.
All right, well done. Very good. Okay. So we'll start off by talking a little bit about Florida's Virtual Business Emergency Operations Center, which is currently in a beta test mode, though that is coming to an end, and it will go out to the public in early 2015. And so the best way to get that conversation started is to turn it over to Tom Duffy here, who will give us a very brief overview of what the system is and how it works.
Good morning. So the Florida VBEOC was originally made as a kind of information portal between the private sector and ESF 18 members. Who is it for? It was really aimed at small to medium-sized businesses, people who didn't already have an existing structure for reporting information about the statuses of their stores. In terms of who it's for ESF 18, it goes from a state and a county level. It allows individual county ESF members to log in and provide information specific to that county. And we've also added recently a kind of federal read-only level, which is we just want to see what's going on without really, editing any of the information. So how does it work? It's fundamentally a website that is a repository of information on planning and what to do pre-disaster, and then post-disaster it tends to be more of a communications channel where businesses can report to us what their status is. Now there was a big focus on ergonomics when we were doing this. I've seen other systems where there was just, if you've got a couple of feet of water in your business or your location, you not necessarily want to be filling in spreadsheets and big online forms. So the whole process was imagined that you select an area, you ping those stores and those locations for their status, and then they receive an email with links in it, and they click the links, and it will automatically update our system with whether they're open from a different location, they're partially open, they're closed, But the system for them is a phone comes out, they can click the link, and then it's done. If they have time to enter more information, they can also be led onto that. But primarily, we wanted that from a response point of view to get a level of situational awareness so that we could then feed back into the EOC. That's the core of it.
That's the 10,000-foot view, definitely. So with that said, I will open it up to comments from the panel. Does anyone have anything they want to add?
Just that in addition to the open-close status updates, we're also using the virtual operations center as a tool in order to provide situational updates to the business community. Our goal is to kind of synthesize the situational information that comes from ESF 14 and pull out those pertinent facts and points that we think are important to the business community, so that the business community will have a snapshot overview of what the emergency management status is related to the private sector and business operations.
And one last point that I'll toss in before I open it back up. It also is the central repository for ESF 18 at the state level, their business damage assessment forms, so that we can gather that information post-impact about what businesses have been impacted and start to try to make determinations on the monetary value of that, et cetera, so that Larry and his team can start putting proper programs into place for that as we move from response to recovery. So anybody else got anything they want to add?
I'll just mention as well, we rolled that out during the Panhandle flooding this year, originally just to collect business damage assessment forms, and that was a kind of a big success for us. We received over 100 forms completed, which may not sound a lot, but in comparison to when Katrina hit Florida, we received 3. So.
How does the private sector report to you? Is it like RS feeds for the open and closed status of their stores? Or?
Well, this is mainly aimed at small to medium-sized businesses because there are other projects like the Usage Sabre project, which is a kind of more aimed at partnering with the Publix and the Walmarts and the bigger stores, and they're basically producing a system by which the larger stores can upload their spreadsheets of their store statuses, and then that then gets dispersed from them in a kind of common format that we can read into our system. So we get that information, but we don't actually collect that information. In terms of how they actually report the smaller businesses report, like I say, there's a quick way through an email link, but then that also leads you onto a kind of, hey, if you have time, what's your electricity status, what's your water status, that kind of stuff.
Can I ask a question? What, from a business perspective, and I wear lots of hats for those of you who know me, from a business perspective, what's the value to me to upload and share this data? What decisions is emergency management going to make that are beneficial to me?
So first of all, for example, the business damage assessment forms, it just expedites the whole process. So from, I think the previous system used to work on faxed forms and, emailed forms, which just wasn't practical to do if you were a business owner whose shop had received damage. This new version is providing that information quickly so that things like, from my understanding is that then bridge loans and things can be activated, those systems can be activated a lot quicker, which, helps with cash flow, helps with all these things, that helps businesses stay open. So.
The other transactional item, if you will, that businesses get from this is that information that Larry touched on earlier, where ESF 18 at the state and coming soon available from the county level will be able to put out information directly to their impacted businesses. And again, looking at the small and the medium-sized businesses that don't necessarily have their own channels of getting that information or having this type of situational awareness, this puts that out to them. So that's kind of the trade-off. The state is looking for that open-closed status information as well as the business damage assessment, and in return we're providing targeted information at businesses that can help them make decisions. And I think yesterday we saw there's a lot of information that businesses need. And again, not necessarily the Walmarts and the Publixes and the Targets of the world, but maybe an independent Ace Hardware or even a mom and pop shop, things like that. They're not getting that information. There's no channel for that right now. So this establishes something that can become official, and we can start to funnel that information through to help those businesses make decisions about what they need to do with their facilities, with their staff, et cetera. Larry, you want to add to that?
Yeah, one of the ways that this virtual system, I think, is going to be beneficial, especially to us at ESF 18, is that we can easily and clearly see where the impacted businesses are within a community. That will allow us to know where we need to target and deploy resources to assist businesses. So we can get a snapshot view of a geographical area. And it was stated we are putting these various impacted businesses, putting them on GPS so we can clearly see a defined area within an impacted community where the most of the affected businesses are. Then we'll know how to deploy business services, open up business service centers, and the source. And also it provides us with specific information relative to any type of technical assistance or business services that we need to provide a specific business in that geographical area. So I think it's going to be a tool that's going to be of tremendous benefit, especially to us and at ESF 18 and up at the EOC, and kind of having some visibility on the ground relative to how we need to deploy and where we need to deploy resources.
Can I just add as well that I think what I was led to believe was that in the initial sort of response stage, when the assessment's going on, they're looking for a cap, a certain amount, a cap of how much the very cost is going to be. So they're looking at damage to businesses, but they're also looking to damage to infrastructure. And once they've kind of realised that, hey, this is quite a big event, they stray away then from looking at businesses specifically, and they start concentrating on more important things, perhaps like critical infrastructure and things like that. Whereas this is all business-centric. All this information is all business-centric, which is, it's kind of new and it's useful to us.
Yes, sir.
Can I just ask, you just mentioned all business-centric, and Larry, with your comment about the GIS and mapping and that capability, do you see a benefit on sharing this information?
Yeah, so we're already doing that, although the technical side of it isn't quite finished. We need to, we're going to provide a layer to Gator for the state level map, so that'll be another layer you can read in.
I just want to follow up for partners, not necessarily business to business, and that information, FDEM, of course, and because we're at the EOC, so we see those sit reps, that's fine. But for our clients, for example, so when activity starts picking up and they come online, the stores in the neighborhood, as we're providing assistance, we're starting to direct clients to resources. Could this possibly be a layer, another resource like Gator at FDEM to say, for the public side, these are categories of businesses that are coming online, the grocery stores, the clothing stores, and so on, and make it simple for a client to say, that's a place I can go.
So yeah, that is possible. One of the problems with that is that we had to be very conscious about a lot of businesses might not want to know, or might not want other businesses to know if they're closed or if they're partially open. So we couldn't release that map publicly. And in the beginning, we were originally going to provide that map publicly, but this isn't a yellow pages of who's open. It's a hey, can we have some information so we can help you better?
I'm going to take issue with the point that other businesses don't want other businesses to know whether or not they're open. You look at the Moore tornado example, or one of the recent tornado examples, where there's a CVS and a Walgreens across the street, and Walgreens can't get in touch with any of their people, so they call the CVS and say, hey, what's the status of my store? That's not the proprietary information that we're worried about getting out and sharing. The proprietary information is much deeper than that. It's inventory levels, it's supply chain strategies. It's not open, closed. You can do a drive-by and find out if a store's open or closed. So.
I think it's important to note that at least the way the system is designed, it has different levels of users, and we have the option of determining which information is accessible by the various users. So as we continue to finish up the beta testing phase of it and to continue to have dialogue with the emergency management community, we have the opportunity to talk about what information is relevant and pertinent to the different types of groups. So as we continue to have dialogue, we would, before we go live with this, we will kind of categorize what users need to have access to various types of information. And one of the components that we do have in the system is doing a snapshot or having a summary report of all of the damage assessment information. And it is our plans to give the emergency management community the results of the damage assessment so that they can get the summary information and kind of have an idea of what's going on a county or a statewide basis. So the functionality and the versatility in the system give us options to make decisions about users and the access of information later on.
From our side, in the state of Mississippi, we focused primarily on the communications platform. And for us, having accurate situational awareness is critical to our business climate so that they can make real-time decisions in an emergency. We are in the process of building, and we're doing this on a modular basis. We've completed the communications platform and actually tested it during the tornadoes of April 28th in our state. hitting 11 counties, and it functioned very well. Businesses were able to make real-time decisions on what they needed to do in their respective areas. We were pushing out information from NOAA, from Mississippi Development Authority, from our health services. One of our primary areas affected during this disaster was the poultry industry. And when you have 1 million dead chickens, that's a health issue. That being said, we're in the process of evaluating how to better receive the information back. We've looked at virtual platform, we've looked at apps. We had developed an app for the outgoing communication. We're now looking at developing an application for the inbound information. That being said, one of the greater challenges is that with the information exchange is being able to filter what is most valuable to our businesses and industries, and they're getting it in real time. So that being said, we've gotten some good feedback on the communication that's gone out, but we're still in developmental phase on collecting the information. One of the other things, to answer your question specific, Kathy, on what's in it for business, is that if we are in an active emergency situation, the public sector and the private sector have things in common. One of the things we need most typically are assets. And the private sector has a far deeper level of asset than the public sector will ever have. So being able to not only know what's going on specifically in that business, but what assets are available during that emergency is going to be critical for us to be able to make decisions and to be able to respond better, faster, and in a more timely manner.
And you're not going to get that from an open-closed status.
Correct.
You need to know about production capacity and,
Inventory, production capacity.
Inventory,
What can you
got it.
bring as a business in that particular event?
That's right.
Steve, Jim?
Yeah, just a question, Tom and Larry, and where you guys are going with this. The gentleman from the Red Cross brought up the question of GIS mapping and how that might tie in with this. Have you guys taken a look at overlays of mapping from utilities companies for power outages to overlay on top of what you're looking at here for damage assessment? I've seen that in other states, particularly California has done that following an earthquake. They've also done Department of Public Works overlays to show street closures, blockages, various things of that nature. Might that be tied in and become a useful tool?
From a, you want? Okay. In the state EOC, that information is already available. So we would be duplicating that effort to put that into this product. Eventually, we may look at getting that information out to the business community because they're going to need that as well. But from an ESF 18 as part of CERT, that information is already there for the decision-making process. We do have, it's a little deeper than open-closed. Tom, you want to talk about the resource side of it?
So we developed, can you hear me? Sorry. So there has been a second phase of development, which is based on a kind of, I don't want to use the word resource matching because it's not resource matching.
You just did.
Yeah, I planted the seed now. It's based on the idea that what I was really against was businesses having to upload inventories into the system, because I don't think it's ergonomic and I don't think people will use it. And that's the basis of it. And especially if you're a small to medium-sized business, I don't think you're going to do it. Also added to that is all the problems of everyone's using different stock inventory systems. It might take 50 years to get all those models to load up easily. So what we've gone for is in terms of a kind of business-to-business and resource sharing capabilities, is literally a simple kind of description process, which uses a kind of a Google search algorithm basically if you log into the site and you need some chainsaws, you can say I need chainsaws, and then it will come up with anyone who's offered that as a resource. But it's not going to say, oh, I have 10 chainsaws. It's going to say, hey, I provide debris clearing and I have these things. Here's my number. Here's my email. And we're just trying to make those connections rather than, I don't want it to be an ordering system. It's more like a Craigslist than an eBay, if you get me.
And I despise both of those.
Yeah.
Both of those comparisons, not the products themselves, but yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
During Sandy and other disasters we've seen on Google Crisis Maps and others, the public telling us what's open and closed, will we be able to incorporate that information into this? And is that, how long do we do what we do instead of just outsourcing all of this to the public?
That's a great question. The public craves this information as much as anybody else, right? Post-impact, particularly in hurricanes, people need to know where they can get gas, where they can get food, where they can get water, because places aren't necessarily open. And, we talked yesterday about how the private sector can really help that along. So how do we get that information out? Well, the public is doing it already in social media. And when Isaac hit New Orleans in 2012, the best source of information I found when I was in New Orleans were the neighborhood association websites, because the neighborhood associations were literally polling their stores and saying this is what's open, this is what's closed, and they were keeping those lists updated. So you can go to a web page and say, Smith's Grocery at the corner of X and Y is open, and then if they close later on, that name would come down. It was very useful, but it was very ad hoc. Not organized. The city of New Orleans did a very nice job of trying to aggregate that information, a few hours after impact, and we're starting to put that together. But again, ad hoc, just on the web, nothing official. We do see a lot of information, and we'll talk about social media specifically here in a minute. We see a lot of information about this, about resource status from a public perspective, in Twitter, in Facebook, in Google+, and we would love to be able to integrate that type of data into the VBEOC, so that information that's showing up on social media about open-close status, about resource availability, yes, I have gas, yes, I have bottled water, yes, I have chainsaws, can integrate into this information and create kind of one common operating picture of what the businesses look like in that impact area. We're not there yet, but we'd love to move there. And if anybody would like to comment on that, that is a great thing to put out to the panel and the audience.
So I have a comment. Although my 17-year-old says that I'm not very adept in anything, I tend to be a social media junkie, and the reason is because it is an emergency. I mean, it's not emerging now, but it's a real technology that we have to use for damage assessment. And even in the small event that we're looking at now with a small relative in Pensacola, we found damage assessment quite impactful from using social media and the pictures of the washout roads and stuff that we weren't getting in emergency management because we just didn't have that visibility. And we're trying to find better ways to integrate the public's damage assessment through that. And we're trying to look for those tools that do it. So integrating that into the VBOC is a plan for the future. And one of the technologies I've seen that has, I was actually speaking to Brian just a minute ago, a company, and I'm probably sure there's plenty out there, but one called Geophedia. And if you're familiar with Geophedia, is that actually using geofencing over any area to grab that content of social media from any general area. So if we know that the impact of a storm or the eye goes over a certain geographical area, we can now geofence that area to see what pictures are coming out through that technology, and integrating that into our EOCs in county and municipalities as well as the state for the public to see what those images are. Because what that helps us as nonprofits do is to focus where the human need is. Right now we kind of use mapping, and if you go to any of your emergency management courses, we're using that kind of swath path and say we're going to use this general area. Well, now we use that geofencing to accomplish what we used to use with maps. Now we use it we actually have real-time pictures coming for us to focus our resources there. So
that's great. Yeah, the Geophedia is great. Hold on, Tom. We're going to go to Michael first.
So social media is a blessing, but it can also be a curse. And with that, I think back to a specific example during Hurricane Gustav. And that was one in which there was a police report that a fire alarm was going off at a grocery store. This goes out over the police band. There are folks who monitor the police band, believe it or not. Then it hits social media, the grocery store is on fire. This is repeated over and over again, and so the community has to send assets to determine, no, the grocery store is not on fire, no, it's not threatening homes, but a small piece of information being misinterpreted flashes through social media and then becomes something that has to be dealt with by an emergency management agency. So that's the curse side of it. And we, as operating our BEOC, we're having to look at saying our information that we're pushing out has to be trusted. So with that, we'll monitor that information, but we won't necessarily broadcast widely what's coming in via social media until we can get a real handle on what's real and what's not.
A couple things on that. Well, you know, there's been a number of studies on that. I think one of the things that showed during Sandy was social media can also be self-correcting in many circumstances. If those kinds of things are also often refuted very rapidly through other users, so others would go on and say, well, I'm in front of that store now and it's not on fire. So that's interesting. But you also risk losing relevance if we get behind the power curve on this thing. If we are hours behind information on this, we will become irrelevant and we may be trusted but useless. And so, you know, we can't ignore it. We will have to figure out how to incorporate that kind of information and you know.
That is the challenge.
Yeah, it will be. But we can't, you know, it doesn't matter if we're so far late on these things. We'll be not adding to the situation, to the solution.
Go ahead, Tom.
So just to go back to the comment about geophilia, one of the main problems with that is that it's purely geolocated information, and in terms of social media, less than 1% of information, less than 1% of tweets or whatever posts are geolocated. There's also another problem that location is location of the phone or the device and not the photo. So that needs to be resolved as well before you can use it. And also this is the idea that social media is always going to be the cherry on the cake. Okay. You've always got to rely on your main reporting mechanisms within the EOC and use social media as either the thing that plants the seed or the thing that updates the situation. We run a VOST for the Division of Emergency Management in Florida, and what we found is that you've got to be very versatile when you're using social media. So when we were doing the spring panhandle flooding, a lot of what we were doing were finding photos and then actually trying to find the location of those photos by using Google Maps and other mapping tools and things. So then we could actually lock them down at a location and then give them to DEM. And we found some good footage on YouTube as well. But that was all done by human work. So this is always going to be a very much like a dual optimization problem. The technology is getting better, but people have to remain experienced and good at what they do as well.
I'm going to toss in.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to add, good morning to everybody. I would like to add what happened after Hurricane Charlie in Orange County.
Okay.
And as a lesson learned, we established a 311 communication center for all the citizens of Orange County. And from that, the county mayor decided also to invest in putting 2 applications available to the general public. One of them is the 311 app, where the general population can file any type of complaints and have access to any type of county services, including our office in consumer protection is what we do on a regular basis. And also during emergency services, to have access to all the different emergency that's provided by fire rescue and what have you. The other one is OC Alert. OC Alert is an application that has the National Weather Service information, and it also it provides local emergency information in reference to road closures and things that are relevant to businesses that they can have access to. The general population also can take pictures if nobody has reported the incident and send it to the 311 center, and we can have access and create a report, and then the appropriate county agency will address the issue, and during times of emergency, it comes in very handy. We also have a live map of all the different emergency calls that come in throughout Orange County, and then you can pinpoint in the map if it's a fire rescue type issue, law enforcement, a fire, or a crash, or what have you. And it's it's been very popular in Orange County, OC Alert. Both apps are free for the general public.
I've got a quick question I wanted to ask. How are we going to use this tool? Obviously, fuel is the lifeblood of any disaster.
Right.
How are we going to use this tool not only to determine what the status of fuel supplies are in the various geographical areas of the state, but also what the private sector is doing towards trying to get the fuel supply restored in various areas?
So you're talking about the VBOC again? Not to be that guy, but you tell me. How do we do that? What do the private businesses need information-wise there? How would you be able to give that to us? How would you be able to share that amongst themselves? What would you like to see?
Well, obviously, I think that that's part of the damage assessment process, because obviously they have fuel in the ground or in above-ground storage tanks. So determining their availability of actually pumping that fuel, so having generators or whatever, and what the condition of the fuel is, whether it's been contaminated or not. Even the fueling facilities around the state, again, bulk supply, what is their status? In conversations we've had in Jacksonville, we understand it's not a matter of weeks of supply at the local storage, it's days.
Right.
And so, again, that has a direct impact on the opening and closing of the port as well. So again, I think from a standpoint of everybody having good situational awareness, this is a tool where there definitely has to be a public-private partnership.
Okay. Anyone want to expand on that?
I'll try.
I'm sorry.
Just real quick. Everybody does. Great.
We learned, I think, in 04 and 05 that we need to keep the recovery / economic part of the recovery within Florida. We went outside the state to get blue tops and things like that, not knowing that we had this stuff right under our nose in other counties. I like the fact that we have this tool. I saw this tool in action during the exercise earlier this year. I like the fact that we have it. And I think maybe going on to the question down the road here is how are we going to use it? How do we educate? And we talked about this yesterday. How do we let the private sector know that the public sector has this tool and it's for the private sector? And how to use it, because we don't want to go through the next storm and not utilize this thing that you guys put a lot of time and effort and money into for our benefit and for your benefit. So, how do we do it now? I look at the open-close status, which is great, but I also look at the detailed status, okay? Because you've got to know how many cows and colts I have and where I'm going and what I'm doing, okay? I don't want to promote my outages because, something walk out the door, you're going to know I'm closed, my retail store is closed. But I want to accentuate the opens and where they are because, when we start looking at these disasters, the dynamics of a disaster, it's not always about rushing into ground zero. It's about supporting around the periphery where the people have evacuated to. And some of us have a bigger concern about that than on ground zero. So, but I want to make sure that the tool is great. I want to make sure that we have a plan to educate the small and medium businesses on how to use it, that it's no cost to them, and how it's going to be beneficial to their business.
Larry might be better placed to answer policy stuff.
Actually, we'll go right here.
I'd like to pick up on that because I think that, the VBOC EOC has lots of opportunity, and everybody in emergency management knows that fundamentally what we're talking about is coordinating human and physical assets, right? Kathy, I think, brought up an incredibly valuable point, which is what's the value to those individual participants. And more than educating, I've always found anyway that it's more of rather than trying to push a solution, you have to pull a solution. And pulling that solution may be some more enhanced communications. The gentleman from Mississippi spoke, I think, or touched on this, of using it as a communications tool. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it extends also to some of the discussion we talked about yesterday in crisis reentry. And being able to disseminate information of value, not necessarily in an email, because I might not be in my email, but I will get a text message or a voicemail, a phone call. And by engaging the individuals, not just pulling information of what's of value to the emergency managers, but pushing that information to the individuals, I think what you'll do is engage that community much stronger, probably get a much stronger response, maybe not 100, but 1,000 people that respond, because they're also getting information from that they don't have to go to a website and read a page about what the status of things are. There's lots of intelligent ways to disseminate those communications in a relevant way, not only by geography, but by the role people play in emergency management. And it all comes down to people. It's not, this discussion's all focused on assets, but it's the people that move the assets into place and make those assets available and get the store open. And I think that a focus on the individuals, the key personnel, and then that gives you a platform that you can then extend all the way into crisis reentry. And as much as I dislike the word credentialing of those individuals.
Ron, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just want to touch upon, FEMA does have an app, that's a smartphone app that's available for the public to download and look at, and inside of that is some disaster reporting information and gathering that they're still evaluating and playing with, but they're looking at a individual being able to take a photo. It has to do with disaster reporting. Be able to take a photo and upload that photo to FEMA. They will look at that photo. They'll do an evaluation of it, make sure that it does have the geotagging and the information that's available with it, so that it's credible. They will analyze it to make sure it has no publicly identifiable information, and once it meets all those gates, it will be uploaded to the site and it will be available for the emergency managers to see and to take that information with. And it also is a repository to collect all of the social media feeds, the Twitter, the Facebook, all those feeds to be collected all in one point, so that the public can then see all of the information that's being put out by the emergency managers, which are the trusted agents that are putting that information out there, so that the public knows that the information is credible and it's coming from trusted sources. So, and to touch on the energy one, I do know that the Department of Energy has an app. It's called Lantern. I'm not the smartest person to talk about that right here, but I do know that it's an app that's out there that they're looking at collecting information on energy, electrical outages, fuel outages. I don't know if it talks to capacity and capability and days of supply yet. I don't believe it goes down to that level of granularity. But I do know that it's an app that was rolled out by the Department of Energy. And again, it's another piece that adds to citizens being able to post information based on what they see from the ground. And then I can't talk to the back end of all the validation of that, but I do know that's an app that's available as well.
Great.
And Ron, I wrote Green Lantern. I can never remember the name of it.
It's Lantern.
Yes. So, Billy, you're right. Fuel is extremely important, and DOE is working on that. One of the issues we have at the state is we turn to the Petroleum Retailers Association, but there's collusion regulations that prohibit them from collecting that information, because Citgo can't tell, BP can't tell, Exxon can't, they can't do that. So we've developed a black box to kind of take all that information, but it's not real time. It's not as accurate as I would like it to be. The data exists there. I mean, there's sensors in the tanks. We know where the trucks are. We know who's open, closed. We know who has power. We know who has comms, but tying it all together isn't there yet. It's doable. There's some regulatory issues we'll have to deal with. And it may not be something that needs to be government driven. Again, as we saw the public put together all the Citgo stations and everything else during Sandy, it may be that this is a problem that's going to be solved for us by the public, but it is moving in the right direction.
Gas buddy.
Gas buddy, yeah.
Yeah.
I would just like to ask, as representative of a different state, and I know we're in Florida and you've been talking about Mississippi, but the private sector, who I work with in the state of Illinois, crosses all those lines. So are they supposed to get all these different platforms, or should we be looking at data standardization elements, essential elements of information, both on the public and the private side, which then the sharing of the disaster intelligence would make more sense? And though I agree with you that we are talking about assets, I think that a lot of companies really do want to know situational awareness and a shared common operating picture that they can make decisions on that may be not happening with just in the scope of one state. So, I mean, where are we on that, how we can from the state? Is that a broader issue of an association or FEMA? Is that a NEMA? I mean,
I'll take it for 1 second. Did Jonathan tell you to say that?
no, he did not.
Because it's,
No, but I work for him, so, we
well,
do.
the director of
we
emergency
also-
management for Illinois is Jonathan Munkin, who he and I have had this conversation before, which is the data standardization piece of it. Is it doesn't make any sense for us to have a different standard all over the place. It drives the national retailers and others crazy to have to deal with that situation. So yeah, it is an issue that we're pushing forward, working as associations and moving in that direction, trying to get to that standardization. So it really doesn't matter what platform it is, that the data can talk to each other across the board. And the other thing is, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that we can develop nice apps. FEMA can have apps, we can have apps, Mississippi have apps, but if the public doesn't use them or is not aware of them, they are useless. So we need to make sure that we're not tilting at windmills here, trying to create things that we think the public's going to use when they're just going to go off and do what they're going to do anyway, and we should be harvesting the data from that source as opposed to trying to get them to download our app.
Did you want to toss in?
I'll add briefly to that user adoption is key to everything. And pushing the value to the user through the dissemination of situational awareness information, and to some place that's reasonable where they're going to get it. And I think in today's world, that's their cell phone. They're not going to log on to a computer from home because they're trying to deal with their own disaster. So unless we can make it so that it goes directly to them, I think you're going to struggle with user adoption. If you do get it directly to them and it's relevant, you may very well get a much higher response rate than you would otherwise. To your point about data exchange, I think that's also vitally important. There's never going to be one system in this country for anything. And I think that data exchange is not necessarily defining all the standards of how data is stored and how data is managed, but simply for any emergency management or public safety type application, requiring a very simple API that other systems can hit. And if everybody agrees to adopt an API that's a standard API, then they can have their own data models and they can do their own proprietary things and deliver value the way they deliver value to their customers. And good old American capitalism, let the best system be the system that people adopt, but insist upon the ability to hit a simple API to request certain key elements of data. And that's really, from a technology standpoint, it's very simple to do. It's just a matter of being committed as a public servant, not a capitalist pig, quite frankly.
And there also needs to be like a dedicated policy for how the information is dispersed and how it can be used. I mean, that's sometimes I can develop things as a technological, someone who can do things with technology, but sometimes my hands are tied because I'm not allowed to access that information. Or
you're talking very simply about data security, privacy, and exchange protocols, and they're not terribly complicated. There's a lot of standards that can already be adopted for security and privacy that's already there. And then it's just simply defining what the critical data exchange is and requiring any system that you do business with to enable that exchange of information.
Great. Larry, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everyone understand that in the current version of the virtual system, we do have situational awareness information that's included in there. I don't think we have it at a point where we're forwarding text messages and email messages directly to individuals that signed up in the system, but a valid component of the virtual system as it currently operating in the beta testing mode do provide situational awareness information from the State Emergency Operations Center out to anyone who can access the system over the internet. And also, we talked about how do we notify the business community. At ESF 18, we have all of the major trade associations and service organizations that service the business community as members of ESF 18. The Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, the Retail Federation, the Bankers Association. So all of the business-oriented groups are mostly represented on ESF 18, and they do a tremendous job in actually sending out information from ESF 18 to individuals that's on their communications and contact list. So I feel pretty assured that once the system actually get tested, finishing the testing phase and ready for full implementation, we can get the word out to the business community. And normally also with the Division of Emergency Management, I don't want to talk for Director Coons, but they do an excellent job in announcing different programs and initiatives, and I'm sure that the announcement about the full operation of the virtual system probably will be something that's included in a marketing plan that Judy will devise at some point.
Great, thanks. We have a question in the audience.
Yeah, Nick Schuko with PwC. Just want to remind everybody that if you look at the RISE initiative program summary, activity stream 3 is around industry standards. And so we're working already, NTT is leading a project with telecommunications. We're looking at some fuel providers. We're looking at different industry groups trying to provide information, collaboration in a non-competitive, non-antitrust basis. And so one of the roles that PwC has is to help sanitize some of this information so that you're not put in a situation where there is collusion. We also have a project that is one of the projects that I've shared with a couple of people around Data Exchange Collaborative, and there we're really focusing on hospital bed availability as a proof of concept. So some of this stuff is already captured under RISE, and we'd be delighted to bring other projects into the RISE initiative if it made sense.
Great, thanks. There are a lot of initiatives on data interoperability out there already, so that's great. I'm glad we're touching on some. I think we've got some other questions in the audience. Yes, ma'am.
About whether the system is available to nonprofit, local organizations as well, private sector nonprofits, because the information about their capacity post-disaster is very important as well. And if they do have access to use that to update their status, what information do you need from them, and how can ESF 15 help to make that happen for you?
As far as the system is now, you would just sign up as a normal private sector member. And when I talked about stage 2, about the resource finding stage, you can select to say if something's a donation or not. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Chat with us after, and we'll see what we can work out there. Yes, sir.
From a standpoint of information awareness and situational update, we can put any type of information coming from any of the ESFs or any emphasis for emergency management. It has that type of versatility. So from a standpoint of providing information and pushing information out, the system would allow us to, if there's a specific issue that relative to healthcare, and we see that particular issue impact the business community, or we want to share it with the business community, we can push it out as an informational message through ESF 18. And we can do that for any specific subject matter that we're dealing with in emergency management at the state level.
Can you direct those communications by topic? Like certain people get health care, certain people get
not currently
fuel?
Currently we don't have that capability. I think the extent of the system at this point, we can send targeted messages based on the geographical location, but we haven't designed the system at this point where it's topic specific.
All right, good. One over here.
Just a quick question. Are there any plans to do any exercises or tests with the business community using the VBOC in 2015?
What's that?
So Julie's shaking her head yes.
Yes, there will be. After the beginning of the year, we will be sending out the information to you guys. It will and so that you can test it and give us the feedback. It would be really
Great for us if we could coordinate that with our own business exercises that we're doing at the same time. So the more notice, the better. That would be really useful.
The goal will be after the first of the year to get that out to you guys with the understanding that if we send it out and ask you to test, if there are bugs or if there's something that needs to be changed, you don't get to yell at me and tell me everything's wrong with it. You have to tell me how to fix it.
Yeah.
And just to remind everyone, we are in a beta testing mode now, and we have, for a year, at least a year, we've been testing various components of it, but as we get closer to full implementation, I think it is a good idea to see how many users that we can get on and make sure that we don't have system crashes or those types of things. So we will expand the number of individuals that's participating in the test, but we have run for a year limited testing, including different types of organizations around the state.
Okay, let's go right here.
Good morning. A quick question is, when this does roll out, how will it be rolled out? Will it be through the Florida Chamber, Economic Development, sales tax forms? And will there be brochures for us to provide our businesses locally?
I think Julie probably needs to answer that.
Yeah. We will be developing outreach materials that'll come out from the division. We'll send that out to you guys so that you can push it out. This came about and we got phase 2 done in about middle of hurricane season, and so trying to make sure we had everything in line and wanting to make sure we're getting the site to where it needs to be, and then we'll be developing, like I said, the outreach materials. We'll be able to get that out to you for your chambers. We did for this event, I actually sent the information about the summit to all of the chambers around the state that we could find a contact information for, which I think is the first time we've done that. So they're starting to hear more and more about what DEM and the state is doing in this realm, and so we will be, marketing and sending it out. There will be a new public service announcement, both video or TV and radio, that will be able to go out and tell people how to get to FL, get a plan to register for their business, and then we can direct people from their business planning into the virtual business EOC. But any ideas that you guys have on how we need to market that, or groups that we need to be targeting or speaking to, we can, coordinate and do presentations like this to those groups. So just send that information to our DEM External Affairs account, and we can definitely coordinate for you guys.
Got one up front here.
Well, it's been alluded to, but all these software products really need to be optimized for the mobile app. It's another step in the process, because we know Verizon is going to have their cell phone up very quickly, but the regular internet service is probably lagging behind.
Real quick, any other questions on the VBOC? We're actually supposed to talk about two things here. So we're going to take 5 minutes right here at the end and talk about social media and how it's being utilized around the state. My first question is this: for both the public sector employees and the private sector employees, raise your hand if you are using social media professionally in some way, anyway, at all. Because a lot of hands. Let's do it the other way. Raise your hand if you're not using social media professionally. That's what I thought. It's a much smaller group of people. It's already out there. It's already being done. We've already talked about it a little bit in this panel. The fact of the matter is the public is going to take to social media no matter what. Okay? They're going to post pictures. They're going to complain. They're going to post damage reports. They're going to ask for help. They're going to ask questions. And we have to be responsive to that. That information's got to get pulled into us in some way. So let's talk. I'm looking for examples from the panel, from the audience, successful stories that you had about how social media is integrated into your operations.
So I can't claim that this is our operation, but I do a lot of R&D, advanced R&D with Rutgers University. And their advanced data center has successfully delivered a project with the city of Newark, New Jersey, where they take a feed from a citizen of a photo. Let's just say it's garbage on the street for the sake of conversation. And that photo actually, once it's validated as being, not pornography, but truly a garbage on the street, that actually feeds directly into the routing systems for the garbage trucks. So by reaching out to the community and collecting this information, the community gets in return, and this is the value equation that has to deliver value to the individual or they will not participate. They get an acknowledgement that that message has been received, and then they suddenly see a garbage truck appear. And then they get an acknowledgement that, you know, that garbage you reported has been picked up. So I think the key statement really to make is that it has been successfully done. I gladly introduce you to those people. Dr. Nabil Adam runs the Center for Advanced Data up there at Rutgers. And what it does, though, is deliver that value back to the individual. So you've engaged the community, and the community feels the positive response. On the city side, they optimize the routing. They literally change the routing on the fly of garbage trucks and how they're GPS routed. Now, does that apply to emergency management? Maybe, maybe not. It all depends on available resources, who's the closest responder with the proper skill sets. Yes, that's a plug for what we do. But it's about optimizing the allocation and use of those resources and delivering that value back to the person that sent you the picture. If there's no value, if I get nothing back from sending a picture in, I'm not likely going to do that.
Right. Great.
So, so for nonprofits in general, and for the organizations that deal a lot with spontaneous eruptions of gift drives and stuff like that, a lot of what we're using social media for is rumor control. So when we see a misstatement out there, is we are monitoring to say, no, we don't need your used fur coats in Miami, and we can try to stop that as soon as it happens. So we're constantly monitoring for misstatements on FEMA is not giving out a $1,500 check to everybody that walks up. So let's redirect that and try to, and basically not spin it, but truth it, of the information that's coming in through social media. We're inept. I won't say we're inept. We don't have enough resources to do it for everything out there, but there are very good resources that can help you. And if you want some entertainment when you start falling asleep in this session, type in your search function on Twitter, Salvation Army, and watch all the stuff that just by typing that in as a search function will tell you about people's opinion of the Salvation Army, or their activities, or their joy, or their great stories. But that rumor control and monitoring, although it's hard, is critical to the success of your brand. And whether you're business, private sector, or whatever, you really can change behavior by addressing and correcting that. So we're using it for emergency management purposes within the Salvation Army and disaster response to help correct behavior or misstatements or misinformation during times of disaster.
One of the most useful things we've seen out of social media, and Dave mentioned it earlier, is the VOS concept. And I'll just touch briefly on an incident we had, really kind of a series of days, not the most recent series of civil events in the state and throughout the country, but within the last year or two, there were multiple different response partners using different softwares, to look at sentiment and things that were coming up, and our VOS found something that software didn't. We were able to forward that up through the chains, and they passed it to local law enforcement to make sure that particular event, was protected in terms of those traffic control, and that the folks who were gathering, had their constitutional right to have their voice. So I think that VOS concept really is very beneficial for us in terms of having that human element, that human interaction that we still struggle with even on a day-to-day basis in the watch office to, have anyone go to find things because there's so much volume and so much noise. So just wanted to touch briefly on that the human element still really is important.
Great.
Hi, this is Julie Roberts, and I'm also with the Division of Emergency Management, and I'll just kind of talk a little bit more about what Brian was just saying. So 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, I joined the division, and as External Affairs Director, my first priority was to get us out there on social media to be able to use it as a tool, but also to be using it as a preparedness tool. So we have our different campaigns where we use one side for our preparedness message, and then when we are activated, we switch over to FL CERT, which is where we provide the life safety messaging. I will never forget, though, in the summer of 2013, it was, I believe, June, and Dave Merrick and Rob McDaniels walks into me in the EOC during the flood, and they say, hey, we have this thing called VOST, and we want you guys to try it out. And I'm like, okay, sure, I have no idea what you're even bringing to me, but great. So they put together the VOST at the beginning of that hurricane season, and I will say, since we had that conversation, the state of Florida has not had a hurricane, so therefore I have told them the VOST will not go anywhere anytime soon. But the interesting thing that we did use VOST for that summer was I was deployed to Alaska for an EMAC mission for a flood, and I was up there for 3 weeks. While I was there, the decision was coming down on the Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin hearing. I'm sitting in Alaska thinking, how am I going to manage the social media and understanding what's going on? Am I going to need to fly back to Tallahassee immediately because we could have had a really bad situation? I emailed Dave, who happened to be sitting in Spain, said, I need you to turn on VOST. I've never used this. What are we doing? He then called back to Tallahassee. They had a committee put together of volunteers, and within that afternoon, that evening, I was getting reports frequently, and we were seeing that, okay, there were some things going on, but we realized that the person who claimed they were going to shoot up Miami was actually sitting in Ohio. So pretty good ground truth to know that I didn't really need to be worried about him being in Miami. So that operation, while it was not related to what we do on a normal basis, was a huge thing for us. We've been able to use them during the flood in the spring. It's just the amount of media that comes in. My entire team can sit there and watch social media all day in our ESF and never be able to keep up with the millions of tweets that are coming through and understanding what that is. So I encourage, if you're on the private sector side or you're with another state, I believe the way Florida State, the CDRP, and our partnership has come together, which is why we're here, is to talk about partnerships. The partnership we have is probably the best one out there when it comes to the VOST situation. I hear other states say they do it on their own, and there's no way that I could manage 30 volunteers during an activation for social media. So I just give a plug for these guys. If you want to look at creating a VOST of any sort, please talk with us. I know that they would be happy to talk with you guys.
Any other comments on that? Questions? Well, we've actually gone over time. I'm sorry. It's 9:40. I have until 9:45?
Oh, no, 9:30.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, David, I'll wrap up.
All right, Brian.
As we sat here, Kathy, I downloaded the Gas Buddy app, and I downloaded the Department of Energy's Lantern Live app. And they're both very nice looking apps. The Gas Buddy one has current gas prices for the gas station down the street. They were updated an hour ago. The Lantern Live one tells me that everybody has power. They're both very nice apps. The difference is that the Gas Buddy app, when you look at it on the store, says there's been over 10 million downloads of it. The Lantern Live app has had 500 downloads. So, the Lantern Live app, again, very nice, but what's the point, So our challenge in emergency management will be to keep up with technology. It's going to change far more rapidly than we will be able to do internally. And so our request of our private sector partners is, help us understand what's emerging out there and how we can take advantage of it. Your folks do it well, your folks do it well. The retail folks, the marketing folks, all of those do a great job of it. Even our public sector counterparts in other agencies, our public works folks, those kind of things, all do a good job of. We simply have to understand what's out there and how we can harness it and then fill in the gaps. There will be some gaps that need filling in that no other product will meet. We've got to understand what those gaps are and target those areas. And it will require constant attention because it's going to change month to month and disaster to disaster. So we're going to have to accelerate how it is that we address technology, utilize technology, and make sure that we're meeting the public's expectations.
That's great. I'm going to just one more point and expand upon what Brian said. Apps are great, and I know counties in Florida have damage assessment apps that you can download. No one uses them. We're in the same problem. We look at the same problem with the VBOC. No one uses them. Does anyone in the room have VBOC bookmarked? No. Does anyone but Brian have Lantern on their phone? One.
499 of the people.
Right. Okay. Who's got Facebook and Twitter on their phone? There you go. So we're looking at the purpose-built software, and that's great. We really need to look at how do we integrate the information flow that the public is already using every day. And that's it's a huge challenge. It's not simple. But with that said, I really appreciate the panelists being here, audience. There is